The big news that broke just before we came on air is that Gerry Hutch, the monk, has been found not guilty of the murder of David Byrne at the Regency Hotel in February 2016. Frank Graney, our courts correspondent, joins me now. Frank, what can you tell us?
Well, unsurprisingly, Kieran, it all boiled down to whether or not the judges believed the testimony of the state-turned witness, Jonathan Dowdall. They saved the best, arguably, for last. They dealt with the two co-accused, Jason Bonney and Paul Murphy, who were on trial for lesser offences. They were both accused of facilitating what happened to David Byrne at the Regency Hotel by providing getaway vehicles. And the court spent a number of hours this morning going through the individual cases in relation to them before finding them both guilty of the charges they faced. They were taken into custody. Their sentence hearing is due to take place in May. And it wasn't until after lunch then when Ms Justice Tara Burns turned her attention and the court's attention to Gerry Hutch, who was the only man on trial for the murder of David Byrne. And as I say, Jonathan Dowdall featured heavily in the court's rulings. His evidence had to be approached with extreme caution for lots of reasons. He is an accomplice. He was involved in facilitating what happened at the Regency Hotel by providing the gang behind it with access to a room at the hotel. But let's not forget that Jonathan Dowdall once upon a time was due to stand trial alongside Gerry Hutch for David Byrne's murder. But as we all know at this point, that charge against him was dropped and he testified against Gerry Hutch. He is a possible entrant into the witness protection program. That was something that the judges had to be very mindful of when they were considering the evidence that he gave just before Christmas, and they spent some time assessing his reliability as a witness. In relation to his decision to testify against Gerry Hutch, just over 1 week before he was also due to stand trial for murder, Ms Justice Tara Burns said the following. She said, "It cannot be said that he found God or decided to do the right thing. He was acting out of his own self-interest. The court was of the view that he received a significant benefit in giving a statement to the guard." Ms Justice Burns said he now has a chance of a life instead of a possible conviction for murder. During the trial, the prosecution was at pains to point out that there was no correlation, no link between Jonathan Dowdall's decision to testify against Gerry Hutch and the murder charge against him being dropped. But the court did feel that he was acting out of his own self-interest. They spoke about his character. We know that he has a very serious criminal conviction for false imprisonment and torturing a man in his home on the Navan Road, and the judges did consider that. They described what he did to that man as truly appalling, shocking, disturbing, a brutal assault, menacing. They also spoke about the lies that he had told, the fact that he had told lies to a court in relation to that prosecution. And Ms Justice Byrne said the court must decide who they're actually dealing with when it comes to Jonathan Dowdall. She said there was a significant question over his character, his reliability, and the court had to approach what he said about Gerry Hutch with extreme care. Jonathan Dowdall made two very serious allegations against Gerry Hutch. The most significant of those related to a meeting in a park in Whitehall. This was said to have taken place a few days after the shooting, and he claims that Gerry Hutch confessed to him his involvement in the shooting. He claimed that he was one of two hitmen who shot David Byrne on that day back in February 2016, and the judges noted that the phone evidence didn't support his claim. They identified serious difficulties in his evidence, and they were not prepared to rely on his evidence in isolation. So what do they do next? They looked to the rest of the prosecution's case for something to support what he was saying, and they didn't find anything.
So remind us of the nature of the prosecution's case against Gerry Hutch, the role that they say he played in the Regency attack.
Well, it was a very specific allegation and a very serious allegation, and I think it took us all by surprise on the opening of the trial back in October now, when the prosecuting barrister Sean Gallan got up and essentially said that it was the prosecution's case that Gerry Hutch was one of the hitmen. He was one of two men who shot David Byrne in the lobby of the Regency Hotel during a boxing event back in February 2016. Myself personally, I suspected that the allegation was going to be that he was directing proceedings from afar, that he was possibly involved in giving the go-ahead or in organising what happened that day at the Regency Hotel. But that wasn't the case pursued by the prosecution. They put him in the hotel with an AK-47 in his hands. They put him pulling the trigger that killed David Byrne, and that was all on the back of what Jonathan Dowdall said in that statement. What Jonathan Dowdall said from the witness box in relation to that meeting, That's what the case was about. This wasn't a case of common design, as Ms Justice Tara Byrne said today. The case was that he was an active participant and that he was actually one of the shooters. There was a lot spoken about the secret recordings. This was 10-hour recordings. You may remember Jonathan Dowdall and Gerry Hutch travelling to Northern Ireland. Jonathan Dowdall's Land Cruiser had been bugged by An Garda Síochána. And in relation to those secret recordings, again, when they went looking for something to potentially corroborate what Jonathan Dowdall was saying, the judges found nothing to support his claims in that 10-hour conversation. They, like myself, found it odd that Gerry Hutch would confess to Jonathan Dowdall in the way that Jonathan Dowdall had claimed, but yet make no mention of his involvement in that 10-hour car journey to and from Northern Ireland. The court was satisfied that parts relied on by the prosecution gave a possible inference that he gave the go-ahead. But again, that wasn't the case run by the prosecution. It wasn't a case of common design. He was accused of being one of the hitmen, and he was acquitted of that murder charge at about 3:37 this afternoon, and the judge directed his immediate release.
How did he react in court, Frank?
There was very little reaction from Gerry Hutch. He is poor of hearing, so he has been facilitated with some headphones that look like those headphones that you would have got with a Walkman back in the 1980s. It's a listening device. It enables him to hear proceedings, I suppose, a little bit better than without them. And I was watching very carefully when it was starting to become clear that he was likely to be acquitted. Up until that point, he had been very attentive throughout. I must say he was taking notes at times, and he gave very little reaction when the judges ultimately found him not guilty of murder. And things progressed then very quickly. He shook hands with his lawyers. There was a brief consultation, a little chat with his legal team after the judges had left the courtroom. I wasn't there myself when he left the courthouse a short time afterwards. I understand he seemed to be struggling to get transport away from the complex here on Parkgate Street, unlike when his nephew Patrick Hutch Jr. walked out of the courthouse back in 2019. Patrick Hutch Jr. also stood trial for David Byrne's murder, but the charge against him was dropped. And I remember the day that the charge against Patrick Hutch Jr. was dropped, he walked straight out of the courthouse and onto the back of a motorbike that was waiting outside for him. That certainly wasn't the case when Gerry Hutch left today. But he is a free man, and the same cannot be said now for Paul Murphy of Cherry Avenue in Swords and Jason Bonney of Drumnye Wood in Portmarnock. Both of them were found guilty of facilitating what happened to David Byrne that day by providing getaway vehicles to the hit team. Paul Murphy, his taxi was used to assist with the getaway, and he raised concerns about the identification of that vehicle in CCTV footage that was shown throughout the trial. And he also produced some taxi receipts that would have suggested that he was actually working at times relevant to the investigation. But the judges, having looked at those taxi receipts, found that they were inaccurate and unreliable, and he was convicted. Jason Bonney, on the other hand, tried to blame his dead father. He claimed that his father was actually driving his black BMW Jeep on the day in question, but the court did not believe him and actually criticised him for trying to implicate his late father. They have, as I say, been remanded in custody, and their sentence hearing is due to take place on the 8th of May.
So, as you say, Gerry Hutch, free man now, and he did leave the court. There was a bit of a kind of a hullabaloo with his transport afterwards. Ultimately, he got a taxi, which then had to do a 3-point turn through the middle of this media scrum and made its way in the direction of kind of the north inner city, up away from the river, for people who understand where I'm talking about, around the criminal courts of justice. What is the perceived wisdom about what he does now, Frank? People will be well aware that he had previously based himself in Spain.
That's right, and he was actually extradited from Spain back in September of 2021 to face this murder charge. Time will tell whether or not he returns to Spain. I see a lot of reportage over the past few days suggesting that he is likely to leave the country if he is acquitted. Gerry Hutch celebrated his 60th birthday behind bars in Wheatfield Prison last week. Time will tell, I suppose, what he decides to do, but he is now a free man. He has been acquitted of the murder charge. He is facing no other charges in relation to what happened at the Regency Hotel 7 years ago now. He is a free man. He has been found not guilty of that charge.
And Jonathan Dowdall, I mean, he is still in witness protection. Has that been confirmed, that he's in witness protection? What do we know about him?
No, as far as I know, and this is going on the back of evidence that was heard during the trial.
Yeah.
Jonathan Dowdall is still being assessed for entry into the witness protection program, and that was something that was made very clear to Jonathan Dowdall before he gave his evidence late last year, because they wanted to make it clear to him that his entry into the witness protection program was not conditional on his performance in the witness box. So as far as I know, he is still being assessed for entry into the witness protection program, but he is also still serving a sentence, having pleaded guilty to facilitating the murder of David Byrne. He was handed a 4-year prison sentence. I do understand that he intended to appeal that sentence, but as it stands, he is serving that sentence. I have no doubt word will filter through to him in due course that Gerry Hutch has now been acquitted of the charge. He spent several days under, cross-examination. Brendan Grehan, on behalf of Gerry Hutch, cross-examined him for a number of days. He accused him of being a liar. He accused him of being a master manipulator. He accused him of telling these lies, or what he claimed to be lies, against Gerry Hutch because he wanted to strike a deal. And again, as I say, the prosecution was at pains to point out that that wasn't the case. Gerry Hutch might be a free man now. As I say, he has been acquitted of that murder charge, but we did hear during the trial and during the course of those secret recordings between himself and Jonathan Dowdall that there was a price on Gerry Hutch's head. The Kinahan and Hutch feud 2016 obviously would have been the bloodiest years in relation to that feud, and there was a price put on Gerry Hutch's head at the time. So again, time will tell whether or not he decides to stay in Dublin, but you do suspect and you do hear that he is likely to leave the country.
All right, well, Gerry Hutch, a relieved man now, and Jonathan Dowdall, I'm sure, relieved as well, Frank, as you describe it. His performance in the witness stand was not going to be a factor in whether he was included in the witness protection programme. Relieved in the sense that the judges of the Special Criminal Court were not blown away by that performance or what he had to say, and given that that was the bulk of the prosecution's evidence, I mean, it raises questions about the decision to bring charges.